Hello and welcome back to Unpopular People.
We believe that listening and learning from each other is key for personal development and success.
Today in our interview, Kellie.
Kellie is originally from Australia, living on the Gold Coast.
She's an enrolled nurse, currently studying mental health.
If you want to find out more about this episode, have a look on our website on www.unpopularpeople.com. You also find the show notes to this episode there.
On our website you can also find a shop to buy clothes that represent our Unpopular People community. And to sign up for our community, you just sign up for our newsletter, also on our website www.unpopularpeople.com.
And now have fun with this amazing interview.
Hi Kellie, nice to have you here today. Thanks for your time. Thanks for spending lunch with us today. It was really nice. And let's get straight into it. Our guests, they don't know you, and just to give them like a brief idea about who you are, maybe you can tell us where were you born and how did you grow up?
I was born in a town called Inverell in New South Wales in Australia. But I grew up in Brisbane, Australia, my whole life. I grew up in the church, and I have two brothers and a sister that are older than me, so I'm the youngest and I'm the spoiled. I am a nurse. I'm not working anymore as a nurse because I'm studying mental health as a diploma, and I have two children. They are 21 and 20, so very exciting times ahead.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood. How was it for you to grow up in a church? So what does it mean?
I actually had a really good childhood in as far as church was concerned. We always had something to do. We were always going places. We were always at church. We had a really good community. You know, if we moved house, they'd help us move house. We always had laughter in our house. My father, which is one of the reasons I want to study mental health, is he was bipolar. He's passed away since, and he was undiagnosed for 65 years of his life, and he was fun and exciting when he was manic, but he was really hard to live with when he was sad and in a depressive state. He was quite violent at times, but in all of that sadness, we actually had a lot of fun, and there was never a dull moment. We did a lot of things that maybe normal people wouldn't do, because my father, when he was manic, we would always do exciting things like move countries and travel 41 of the US states and follow rock bands around. And so he was when he was good, he was amazing and fun, but when he was bad, he wasn't really great. But yeah, my childhood was, I went to a public school. I fought with my siblings. They're a bit young, they're a bit older than me, so I was a surprise package. I wasn't meant to happen, but I did. And I've always been extremely close to my family, but my parents especially, because I was the younger one. It was me and them, and we've been to New Zealand, we've been to Mexico, we've been to Canada, we've been to the USA, and none of the other siblings got to do that, just me. Yeah, so but we always had laughter. I think, like, even though there was trauma and traumatic things happening because of my father's illness, we would always laugh. Like, we could be my mum and dad could be in the middle of a fight, and then something would happen and we'd all just roll around laughing, and then we'd get back to the fight. But it was, I think it made me resilient. It did actually, you know, there was a lot of trauma there for me growing up with a violent father, but it also made me appreciate the fact that we all have our own struggles, and where, you know, we don't know what someone else is going through, and we don't know what another family is going through. And there were many times in my childhood where I would wish that people from my church would actually intervene. And of course, in that era, nobody talked about domestic violence, and nobody talked about you know, violence in the home. So, and because my dad was so loved by everyone because of his personality, it was, people didn't really believe you. So there was that trauma and there was that hard times, but I actually think it made me resilient, and it made me love people, because because my father would want to move every every year or two, so we'd always shift, so I'd always go to new schools. So it gave me a love of people, and he did too, because he loved people when he was in a good mood. Yeah. So, yeah, I think my childhood was sort of typical Australian. When I say typical Australian, you know, we'd have dinner, we'd have lunch every Sunday together, and, you know, Dad loves sports, we love sports, you know. Growing up, obviously people from overseas won't know that rugby league, but rugby league was a huge sport in Queensland. And, yeah, so we just watched a lot of things, and, well, yeah, laughter's probably what I get from my childhood. That's the term I get.
Yeah, nice. Laughter is a good thing, I guess. And so with the mental health disease your father had, how did your siblings handle it? Did they handle it as well as you?
So my siblings probably went through a lot more than I did, because they were older. So the age gap is 12 years with my oldest brother, 9, and then 6, and then there's me. And they talk about things that I don't remember. My sister talks about, you know, the violence that she remembers from my dad, and it was a lot more severe than what I remember. I guess I kind of sort of say, by the time I got old enough to be conscious of what was happening, he had gone from being physically violent to being more controlling and verbally abusive. My siblings talk about things that are just horrific, and the things that my mum has gone through are just beyond people's imagination. And, you know, from a 2021 viewpoint, we'd be like, well, why did she stay with someone that had an undiagnosed mental health disorder? Because, yeah, like I'm talking, you know, 46 years ago, there was you didn't admit you had a mental health issue. You didn't. If you were, you know, crackers, or like, no, that's Australian, isn't it? If you were considered crazy, everyone just shunned you from the community or whatever, not just like church community, but social, like society. Whereas now there's more awareness, and I know that some of my family have struggled with why my mum stayed in such an abusive relationship, and part of it's probably because when he was good, he was so much fun and they got along really well. But I also think, you know, she's 80 now, so their viewpoint from when she got married was, this is it, this is forever, and no matter what. And there wasn't, like in Australia, there's a lot more services and resources now than there would have been 46 years ago to help someone. And my siblings, I think as adults, they've all dealt with it in different ways about our father. Even though he was horrible, my sister and I have talked about this, and even though he was an asshole, I really, really loved him. And even though we've talked about, we always lived on edge of what he was gonna be like when we got home, or when he came home, was he going to be okay? And he did get help when he was about 65. And he even said it was like a light turned on for him, that was actually why he was behaving the way he was. It was like he suddenly felt like, okay, I know that I've done these things, but why was it? And now I know why, because I have bipolar. And so he got medicated. But because of the way bipolar works, the disease is, if you don't get it early, it really can damage like your brain, I guess. I don't know all the technical medical terms, but the earlier you get any kind of illness, the better. So because for 65 years he'd lived with this illness, the amount of recovery or the amount of healing that he could have was limited, but he still was a different person on medication. Like, I've often asked my mum, did you see the difference? And she said, yes, definitely. So my siblings and I have all handled things differently. They're all beautiful people, and they all, have had some experience now with mental health. And, I personally have mental health issues that probably stem from living with an unpredictable parent. But I also can see him as a strength as well. And I think it comes down to the way you view things. Trauma is horrific, but if you can work through that trauma, then you can actually use it for good.
And if there are people, any listeners that know a person that's bipolar, do you have an advice how to handle these people? What is the best way? Because when you live with them, or when you know somebody, how do you act? How do you handle these people?
I've got to stop saying with Dad, I think even though he was horrible to my mum the way he was, she still just loved him anyway. I would never advise someone ever to stay in a relationship, whether it be partner, or if you're a child and you're old enough to leave, I would leave. Like, I would never say to someone, stay in a relationship with someone that's undiagnosed. And I think the most important thing is finding out what it is. And unfortunately, you could say to someone, I really think you need to get some mental health help. But unless they're actually willing to admit that there's something, there's never going to be any change. And for a lot of years, my dad was like that. Even when there was understanding of mental health coming in, the sort of late 80s, early 90s, he would still be like, no, you guys are all the problem, not me. So if you're living with someone that has a mental health issue, especially bipolar, because that's what I know about, I would tell people to love them, but maybe love them from afar if they're violent. Never advise someone to stay, in a violent situation. Encourage help, encourage therapy, encourage, to get that help so that you can actually live a better life. And, my work as a mental health nurse, there was people that had committed major crimes, but actually with the right help, they're actually able to go back out into society and function. And so treatment is really important. Definitely treatment. And you can love someone, but you don't have to love them in the same household if it's too dangerous for you. So, yeah.
And for yourself, I imagine it's really hard. So how did you handle it? Do you have an advice for how people can handle it for themselves?
I think for me, because I had like the grounding in church, there was always hope that it might be better. It might get better. I think my mum had hope that things would always improve. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. And I didn't handle it great. I mean, I think for me, my emotional age probably stopped when I was in my teenage years. I became very dramatic and because I would live in a fantasy world or like live in my imagination, because I didn't have to deal with what was going on in our lives. But in saying that, like I said before, we would always laugh and we'd always have fun, and family was always the most important thing. And I come from a massive family. Like my mum has 11 siblings. They're all still alive, and I'm related to everyone in the Salvation Army just about. And so for me, I had to get to the point where I actually could forgive my father and actually look at the good things that he brought to my life. And the fact that I have traits like him. For many years it was very hard for people to say to me, they would say, "Oh, you're just like your father." And I'd actually want to punch them in the head, because it was always in a negative connotation. Now, if someone says to me, "Oh, you're just like Jeff," which is my dad's name, I would say, "Oh, good, because I liked him." So it's not a negative connotation. I think for someone that lives with people, like my children lived with me, and like I said, I have my mental health issues. More of the depression for me is, my children, how did they survive? They all both are still in the process of reaching a point of forgiveness. And I think we all, regardless of whether it's mental health, we all bring trauma from our past into our future, and it's what we do with that, whether we choose to stay stuck and be not move on and live the best life we can, or whether we deal with it and go, you know what, I forgive that person. And you're not forgiving that person for them. Isn't that the cliche? You're not forgiving them for them, you're forgiving them for you. And I think, I learned a lot about forgiveness from my dad as well, because a lot of people had hurt him, and the reason he had bipolar is because a trauma happened to him when he was 21. And he obviously had a predisposition for it, but that triggered the bipolar. And so, he brought a lot of trauma through into our lives because of what he did, and I did to my children as well. So, yeah, I just think everyone has something that they have to deal with, and it's how you deal with it as a human and how you move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, you used the word forgiveness, and I have a question about this, because you said when your mom found out, or you all found out when he was 65, or he himself found out that he was bipolar, and that made it probably easier to forgive him for all the things he has done. But what can you recommend to people that have still troubles to forgive someone? Because it's not necessarily that, when you find out that this is the reason why, like, some person did horrible things to another person or to yourself. Yeah. So it's not always an insurance that you can forgive someone. Yeah. So how can you use forgiveness? How can you, work with this?
I would say forgiveness is not a one-time thing. So there's still times that if I hear, especially a big man, like if they're 6 foot, if I hear a big man yelling, or or carrying on, I get really traumatized, and I use the cliche trigger. It's a trigger, and I think, oh no, that poor person. I've got to get away from them, and or I want to interfere and tell the guy to shut up and get away. So there's definitely still triggers there for me, and I think one thing that my mum has, fostered in us is that we've always talked about it. Sometimes, maybe we've talked about it too much, that it's just become too normal. We've normalised the abuse too much. But every day it's a choice for me to say, do I want to love someone or do I want to live with hatred? And I think, worry and negative feelings actually have negative impacts on your mental health and on your physical health as well. People that worry are more likely to get ulcers in their stomach. People that live with bitterness, forgiveness is a really hard thing. I'll use the example, I had an abusive partner. So I then continued the cycle that my mum had done. I had my first husband was he was quite controlling, not so much physical, but he was very controlling. And I left and divorced him, and I met this other person, and he became very physically violent. And he traumatised both my children. He used to beat up my son, and he was probably, my daughter and I have talked about it, he was probably grooming her. And so how do I forgive that? How do you forgive someone? I didn't know that he was beating my son up until the day before I left him. He was from overseas, and once I found out that he was doing that, we left immediately, and I went to my mum and dad's, and my dad was amazing in crises. He was amazing, and I basically kicked this guy out of the country because I was his sponsor. And also found out that we'd had a wedding ceremony, and I found out the day after the wedding ceremony that he was actually married to someone back in Scotland. So he not only was traumatising my little family, my kids and myself, he actually was married as well. Nothing was done legally, so he was never actually legally married to me. But how do I forgive him? I struggle that it's been 15 years, and I still think, oh, that asshole, how dare he? How dare he do that? But then he doesn't care, so then why should I? And so I think, well, I'm just going to choose to forgive. But it's a daily thing. It's not my children both struggle to forgive him, as they would, because of the trauma that he put them through. And, a lot of that may have gone over into their adulthood, and they're both trying the best they can to survive in their life. And some days they're killing it, some days they're not. And how do I forgive myself? Because I put them in that situation. Yeah. I don't know. I think about 6 years ago, I had a mental breakdown, and I went to hospital, and I think that breakdown was the guilt that I had felt for a few things to do with my children, but introducing them to this man from Scotland, that was probably the biggest guilt thing in my life. And I spent a week in hospital. Thanks to the amazing healthcare system here in Australia, I spent a week in hospital being assessed, being looked after, because I was quite suicidal. Unfortunately, because of that happened, my son was put into foster care. His father refused to step up and my daughter went and lived with someone else, which then brought its own kind of trauma. So I have found it hard to forgive myself more than I have to forgive other people. And there's guilt there too. And, you know, sometimes someone will say something and you'll just think, oh, I'm so bad, I did the wrong thing. But I see a psychologist, and one of the things she says is you can only do what you know at that moment. So I only knew at that moment that this man had beaten my child and was doing things that he shouldn't be doing to my daughter, and but I did the best that I could at that point because that's all I knew. And hindsight, you go, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. But really, how do we know? How do we know? And I think hindsight, we can go, oh, we should have done this decision or should have done that. But you can only make that decision in that moment. And I think that guy has stopped me from trusting men, and especially after having a father like I did, then a first marriage that was like it was, that I put up a big barrier and actually wanted to become less attractive to men because I like men. But so I guess I ate more and didn't look after myself properly. And I think binge eating was a way I dealt with things, and I think even with my father. So growing up, one of the things we did was eat, and it was always fun eating. So we would eat everything. Like we would have massive meals. My mum loved to host people, and she loved cooking. And, you know, she always had food for about 50 people when there was like 5 of us. So we ate a lot, and I think that was a coping mechanism. And then with this man from Scotland, I think he just broke something in me that I just didn't trust anyone. So I haven't been in a relationship for 15 years. Because the moment someone may show interest, I think, oh shit, what are they going to do, you know? But I've come to the point now where I don't really care anymore, because you know what? If they're good, they'll stay around. If they're bad, they'll go away. And so I think, you know, how you cope with forgiving yourself, well, sometimes you eat, sometimes you do drugs, sometimes you exercise too much, sometimes, you know, you pick a partner that's abusive. I wish I could say I'd done the exercise too much one, but I haven't. I've done everything else. I've done the eat, I've done the, you know, drinking and but yeah, so and I think like I guess what I was saying before, you know, we want to become the best versions of ourselves. And, you know, you guys were talking about how we learn from other people by listening. Something I struggle with. I love people's stories, but I also love my own story. So, and that's honesty, I'm being honest. Because I think, you know, I've been through so much that I want to help people. You know, I've lived with an abusive father. I've had abusive relationships. I've had children that have had additional needs. And instead of me focusing on all the bad stuff, which is probably what I did through their childhood, I now look at it and I think, look what they taught me. Look what my children taught me. Look what my children did. They gave me patience. They gave me strength. They gave me hope and belief. And so you know, we're never going to be perfect. And I think that someone that, like my mum, aspires to be perfect because that's her makeup. From her childhood, she was expected to be perfect. She's then put that onto me. So then when I feel guilty, I think, oh, I'm a failure. But actually it's just a normal human emotion to go with that guilt. But it's when you let that guilt overtake and then you don't forgive yourself or someone else, introducing that guy from Scotland was probably the biggest thing, I added to my children's already traumatic divorce from their father, and thinking that this man from Scotland was the end result, like I was going to be with him forever, and then finding out he's married, and it was just a really horrific time. I'm okay now to talk about it because it's so long ago, but I also have had a lot of therapy and a lot of psychological help. If someone is struggling with mental health, your first port of call is your doctor. And if they don't help you, then you go to another doctor. And one of the things I tried to do with my children when I found out that my son was being beaten by this guy from Scotland and my daughter was not coping, I would take him to doctors and psychologists. But I think I over-doctored them. Like I sent them to too many that they now both are really reluctant to go to doctors. And sometimes we didn't get the help that we needed. And sometimes the people would blame me, and like the doctors and the professionals. And I remember saying to one professional, well, if it is me, you need to help me. Mm-hmm. And they just said, no, you just need to stop. And I'll be like, stop what? Yeah. So sometimes it's finding the right help, the right professional, and it's very hard to find. Now I have an amazing GP. In fact, when I had my breakdown, she saved my life. She sent me to the hospital, and she was the one that recognised that I really needed to be somewhere safe. And I have a good psychologist, and I'm quite open about the fact that I have a psychologist, because I think, well, I'm getting help. Are you? Yeah. I'm doing what I can to be a better person. Are you? I'm not going to judge you, but don't come at me and say, oh, you shouldn't be seeing a psychologist. Oh, you're nuts. Well, guess what? We're all nuts. Yeah. So we all have issues, and we're all human. Yeah. And I think it's in our brokenness and our in our brokenness and in our humanity that we're actually the same. And that should be the reason we come together, not the reason that we don't talk to certain people in society. I'm a massive, big believer in stigma, and I don't want stigma. I want to change stigma, especially around mental health. I hate that people think that one of my big bugbears, and yes, I am a Christian, but one of my big bugbears is that Christian people, fundamentalists, I'll just make that definition, extreme Christians believe that someone with a mental illness is demonic and possessed by demons, and actually really, really annoys me, because they wouldn't say that about a cancer survivor or a cancer patient. They wouldn't say that about someone with diabetes, who actually probably should change their lifestyle and eat better, but they're not demon possessed. And so, having worked where I worked in mental health, it actually gave me a chance to see that humanity, because I guess I've been brought up with a father that had a mental illness, but also within that, people will be like, oh, he probably needs, demons cast out of him or whatever. But actually being in this job in a mental health, as a mental health nurse, it was really good to actually see people that are just broken and they're not actually evil. And that is a stigma that I would fight for, because I think, how dare we put an illness in that category? And that's my view on stigma. But yeah, I don't know, I've covered a lot.
We're taking a quick break and be right back into the show.
As Kellie has a community with her church, we have a community too.
To join us, visit our website www.unpopularpeople.com and sign up for our newsletter.
On our website you'll find our Unpopular People shop with Unpopular People clothes and fitness services that represent our community.
And now back to the show.
I would like to know, if you are looking for a psychologist, how do you find the right one? Do you have advice for people? Do you feel it, or what is the most important things?
So I don't know how things work in other countries, but here in Australia, if you want to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you have to go to your general practitioner, so your GP, and they then write up a healthcare plan for you, which then entitles you to now 20 free visits to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And I've had a few psychologists and psychiatrists over the years. I had an amazing one in Toowoomba. I knew the moment I walked in there that we were just going to click, and she was a psychiatrist. And it's very unusual here in Australia for a psychiatrist to also do talk therapy. So normally with a psychiatrist, they're just all about the medications, and they see you, they put you on the medications, and they see you again in 3 months to make sure it's all going well. Well, this psychiatrist in Toowoomba, she also did psychology with me, so she did. And I don't know how I would have got through my children's childhood without her, because she was real, and she was probably the only one, because I lived in a town called Toowoomba, which is about 2 hours west of Brisbane in Queensland, and they didn't have the resources that were needed for children that might need some extra help. But I had this amazing psychiatrist. She got me through it, basically. She was the first one that was like, okay, I think you've got depression. I think, and it's really hard because I am an extrovert and I seem bubbly and friendly. I often think, I'm not like him, but I often think of Robin Williams, the actor, and he was this bubbly, outgoing personality, but he suffered severely with depression. And I think you can never know just because someone looks okay. So I had this psychiatrist, and she was amazing. I found her through my GP. They sent me to her because she was someone that would do it for free for me. And then I moved to the Gold Coast, and I knew that I needed to find a good doctor and maybe a psychiatrist and psychologist. What ended up happening was I found a really amazing GP here on the coast, and she, like I said before, she saved my life several times. And she's someone now I can just walk in and just say anything to and know that there's going to be no judgment. And it was about a year and a half ago when things had deteriorated, maybe, a bit more than that. Things had deteriorated with my son and I living together. We were not able to stay living together, and he and I just needed someone extra to talk to other than my GP, because she's got 15 minutes with me. So we found this new lady. I believe she was new to the Gold Coast anyway, of doing psychologist, a clinical psychologist she is. And again, I think I was just really lucky. I walked in and I went, oh yeah, we're going to get along. And even though she probably doesn't give me a lot of advice, and I guess we're learning this too in our course in the Diploma of Mental Health, she doesn't say much, but I just sit there and vent and la 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 la, and then I walk out thinking, oh, she was great. And she probably said like 4 words, But it's someone that's not emotionally attached, someone that is not involved in your everyday life, but actually you're able to just come and go blah, 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 blah. And actually she has been the one that has given me more confidence in who I am. She's the one that has given me more more, I guess, courage to actually stand up for myself, and because of the home environment I grew up in, I didn't have a voice, and I had and I love my sister, so if she hears this, I don't want her to be upset with me. But my sister is a very strong personality, especially growing up. She was like a strong personality. She also had trauma from the father that we had, and I think it's given me, this psychologist I see, she's just given me such an ability now to have tools to actually say, oh, that's not actually how I feel. I actually want this. And she's given me, like, I don't know, she's made me think, oh, actually I'm not a bad person. I don't need to have all this guilt, and I don't need to, and I can forgive myself. And I think, going back to the question you asked, Ben, about how do you forgive yourself? How do you forgive, when someone's done this horrific thing to you? And she's actually, given me permission to, hate my father, hate that guy from Scotland, and grieve through it, and actually get to the other end. So, it's hard for me to not be emotional about things, but also for me, I find if I talk about things, it's easier to then say to someone, hey, I know what you're going through, because I had an abusive father. I had, an abusive husband, well, a partner. So forgiveness is really hard, going back to that. And I just think we all have to find our own path to that forgiveness, I saw a quote that said, don't let someone live rent-free in your brain. I like memes, so I see a lot of memes. I'm like the meme queen. I just love memes. When I die and people go through my phone, they're going to just be like, she doesn't have any photos of her children, just memes.
So, by the way, what's your favorite meme?
I have several. I really loved the toilet paper memes last year when COVID was happening and everyone was running for toilet paper. I was like, really? I'm running for the chocolate, and the lollies and the chips. I don't, I can have a shower. I'm part of a nursing memes group, and some of their memes are just disgusting, and I've got a few they're really funny too, but I've got a few friends that I can send them to, because I could never put them up on my Facebook, because even though if you asked any of my friends on Facebook, they would tell you that I like to offend everyone. But what is my favourite one? I think there was an Easter one last year. I think the COVID ones have been the best, but there was a one last year that had a picture of a cop car, a police car, they might know, police car out the front of the tomb of Jesus, and it's got Jesus trying to come out the tomb, and the cop goes, no, back in there for 3 months because of COVID. So it's like not even the resurrection can be happen this year. So I have there's a few of them. Yeah.
So if you find it, we will link this in the show notes. Please give us the note. Yeah.
I know I've talked about a lot, and I know that, gone around in circles too. Thank God for editing. But yeah.
So I have one more question about forgiveness, because I think that's a very interesting topic, and I have a lot of questions about your nursing, of course, as well, which will come a little bit later. But with forgiveness, I was just interested because I study a lot at the moment about free will, and the question, if we have free will or if we don't have free will. And as a Christian person, I guess you believe that people are born with some sort of free will, but we'll get to this later. You probably say something about this. But would it help to understand or to believe that people don't have a free will, to forgive them? If someone like does something bad in any way, it doesn't mean that it's a good thing or whatever, but it still means that it wasn't necessarily his or her choice.
So perfect sort of scenario, Ben, is that when I was a mental health nurse, obviously I can't go into specifics of the client, of the patients, because of privacy and confidentiality, and the fact that a lot of them, they were probably very well-known crimes. What I want to say is that a lot of them didn't have a choice in probably the crimes they committed, but I think that those choices were lost when trauma, again coming back to trauma has come along. Like with my dad, I can talk about him because he's my dad. He had a really traumatic incident happen to him by someone in authority in the church when he was training to be a minister. And does that mean he has diminished responsibility for the things he then went in the future and put us through and put my mum through? And I guess it comes back to getting help and trying to realise that you actually need help. And I guess I believe in free will. I really do. But I think that there may come a time, so say with a drug addict, I believe they have the free will to take those drugs that are not good the first time. But like the first time they take a drug, then once they're hooked, they don't have a free will anymore because they're hooked. They've got no other option but to continue that habit and addiction because they chose that one time.
But what if the sad story of the person doing the drugs for the first time brought them to this choice of doing the drug for the first time, and the sad story convinced them to do it?
What I think you're saying is that even though he might choose to take that drug, maybe trauma has led him. Is that what you're meaning? Trauma has led him to make that decision. I think we still have a degree of free will. Like I have the choice. I had the choice to be bitter and angry and hate everyone that has a mental illness because of my father. But I chose hope and love and forgiveness. Sometimes I think, especially you'll hear it with addicts that speak that are in recovery. They'll talk about how, nothing mattered but that drug. But then at some point, there's a point where they get to and they think, I actually need to choose and get help. And I think, I don't know if it's as simple as this, but I think we all eventually get to a point where we can choose or not choose. And then, can my son choose? He's had all this trauma happen to him, and my daughter, but I'll use my son. He's had all this trauma happen to him. Does he choose to just keep repeating that trauma and become like the person that traumatized him? Or does he come to a point where he's using drugs or he's drinking a lot, or does he choose to work it out? And I think the free will is in that. Like, he has the choices there. Do I make a choice to do the right thing? Of course, there's going to be things for the rest of his life, and mine, that are going to be affected. Like I said, I hear a male yelling or even slightly raised voice, and it triggers me. And that's the same probably for my son. If he is someone from Scotland, maybe it traumatizes him, triggers him. And of course it should, because it was a horrible thing that they went through. but I think maybe I believe with free will there's some free will, but that some things just happen and we have no control over them. So you don't choose your family that you're born into. You don't choose whether they're going to be abusive or loving, so that's not a free will on your decision.
Or you don't choose your skin color, your hair color, your eye color, your nationality, your town, your
sexuality as well. I mean, that was a big thing for me as a Christian, actually coming to a point where I love the LGBTQIA plus. I think I got it right. I don't mean to offend anyone. I had a free will, but I'd been taught to not accept them. But then I got to a point in my life where I went, actually, you're wrong, and I want to be loving and accepting and actually embrace these amazing humans, because they're human. They're not a skin color, they're not, we don't, how do I rephrase this? I always think of it from a medical point of view, because I've done a little bit of anatomy and physiology, and I always think if we took the skin colour off, like if we took our skin off, we'd all be the same. Whether you're gay, straight, black, white, yellow, whatever, if we all got blood and veins and hearts. And so from my point of view, I just think we have a choice to how we live, but I do believe that some things happen, and sometimes, so where I worked, they had horrific things happen to them as children, and at what point did they get to, and they decided that, hey, I'm just going to continue that? Did they have a point? Was there a point? I think with mental health, we talked a lot about mental health here. I think with mental health, I think a lot of the choices are gone. I don't think, having worked with criminals, I don't think a lot of, I don't think they have a choice when it comes down to it, because especially for example, a schizophrenic, if they've got bad, negative auditory hallucinations, and that hallucination tells you to kill someone, and there's many discussions, many blogs and podcasts probably about whether they're accountable or not. But if they've got someone as real as you guys are to me, you're not my hallucinations, are you? No, okay. But as long as they've got that negative that feels real to them, and they kill someone because they think that person is going to kill them, are they responsible for that? And so from a nursing point of view, and working with them, I don't think they are. I think they should pay a price because they did it. And they do. I mean, I don't know about other countries, but here in Australia, or here in Queensland, I should say, they do have a mental health hospital that is for people that have committed crimes. And they're looked after by nurses, not by guards. And it can be scary, but they're also human, and they've made mistakes, and they've got an illness, and they deserve a second chance, third chance, just like the rest of us. It's just that their crime is more obvious because they're in a hospital jail setting. So maybe they didn't have a chance, maybe they didn't have a choice. Maybe their free will was taken as a child for them to say no to abuse or no to trauma. I didn't have a choice to have a father that was bipolar. But I had a choice once I got to be an adult of how I dealt with that, getting help, talking to people. I mean, Mum and I still talk about stuff that happens, and she gets triggered by things probably a lot worse than I do, because she spent 54 years with him, and she's what she's been through, she should really be a basket case. If my siblings hear it, they'd be like, yeah, she's a basket case. But she's not. But that's in a funny way. She's not crazy. but we always tell her that she is. just the Australian humour coming through. But yeah, so, you know, like someone that's probably been through something similar to my mum may be, you know, in hospital with and catatonic, like a zombie, but she's not. And that's because she has chosen to have hope and love and forgiveness in her life. Yeah.
When you worked as a nurse, as a mental health nurse, and you had many experience with so many different kind of people, how could you handle it that you didn't take it personally when they acted really strange or scary, you said, to you?
That's a really good question. I don't know if it's just me or everyone can do it, but I seem to be able to compartmentalize certain things in my brain. So I think I would go, I'm going to work, and this is work. And I think also having had, so even though you can't get paid for lived experience, you know, having gone through with my father and stuff, I think it's a really valuable asset in people that work with mental health. Even if they don't have a mental health illness, if you have had a loved one or have, you know, worked with people that have mental illness, it's actually a really good asset to have. When they were, so we had a saying at where I worked that 90% of the time they were calm because they had the good drugs. Like, they had the drugs that were keeping them calm. But 10% of the time, shit went down. Like, it went down. And it was, you know, it could be scary. I think I was only ever scared once when I worked there. You know, I was a casual with not much experience, only my own lived experience. I was a casual worker, and there was some really, you know, experienced, good nurses that had been there, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, and they've seen everything. And they were really quite protective of the newbies. But also they probably have had a lot of trauma happen to them having worked there so long. But I think, you know, if someone was, I guess I was able to categorise it as, well, they're unwell, so that's why they're playing up. That's why they're, you know, not why they're being aggressive or scary. There was only probably one time I really felt scared, and that was, I was left on my own with a patient, and that scared me. But in saying that, the team was there in a second when I needed them. So I find, I obviously have not worked in a general hospital, but I've worked in mental health, and the team work in mental health as mental health nurses is second to none. Like, it's really amazing with, you just work as a team. You just do. And, you know, because I was a new casual, I didn't have to make any decisions, so it was fantastic. I just followed what the nurse in charge would say. You're right, you're going here, okay, off I go, you know. But yeah, you're trained really well. You're trained in aggressive behaviour management really, really well. And you know, if someone's interested in mental health and they want to maybe work with really sick, unwell people, working in criminal mental health is actually really rewarding and interesting. I mean, I can't tell you things because of privacy and stuff, but some of the things that happen just changed my viewpoint, changed my mind about things. Like I was saying before about demonic possession, working where I worked changed that whole mindset for me, and I actually was able to view them as a human that was sick. And I mean, I had a friend that I could, a nursing friend that I could, debrief with. And also at the hospital that I worked at, they had an amazing peer support if something traumatic happened to a nurse. I mean, I didn't have anything. There was only a couple of things that happened that were maybe a little traumatic, but there was lots of other things that happened to other people that were far more traumatic, I guess. But they had that there, and you got to talk to an experienced older nurse, and that was good. Like, it was an experience, like, it was my dream job. Talking about forgiveness and grief, I had to give up that job last year, and due to an illness that I have. And I grieved for so long because that was my dream job. I was ready to just sit there until retirement, And I didn't work much last year because of COVID, and because you're casual and you fill in for holidays and stuff. So when nobody's going on holidays, there's no work for casuals. But when I left, like, I remember being in tears to my boss. I'm just like, I don't want to, but I have to. And I didn't think I would find anything. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. And my psychologist, again, the one that I see now, she said to me, actually, you're allowed to grieve and actually forgive yourself for getting sick, because I actually didn't choose the illness. The illness chose me. But, so my free will was taken from doing the job that I loved. And, I loved the people. And, people used to say to me, how can you love those sorts of people? And I'd be just like, because I do, and I don't know why, but I just do. And, but when I lost that job, there was a lot of forgiveness I had to forgive myself. And then I decided that I'd like to do the diploma in counselling. But when I went to enrol in the diploma of counselling, it was all full. And the enrolment officer said to me, well, we have mental health, which is similar. And I went, oh, that's all I want to do. I didn't know there was a diploma of mental health. I thought I had to do counselling to do mental health. And he goes, oh, well, don't go into the counselling, just go into the diploma of mental health. And I'm so glad. It's such a great, like, it's only been our first term and just learnt so much, cried a lot. But, yeah, it's been really good to reflect, and I'm actually really excited for what's going to happen. I don't know where I'd go. I know what I would like to do with it. I might have to do more study, but I don't really want to do more study, but because I think I'm too old, but, I'm not. But I am.
Yes, thank you so much so far. I just have another question about nursing, because we didn't really get to the beginning of the nursing, and so I'm just curious. So why did you decide to become a nurse at first place, and when was this? When it was straight after school? Or?
Okay, so I must be a late bloomer. So just a quick, I left school. I did nothing for a year, just lived off my parents. And then I went to a youth leadership school because I wanted to be a youth pastor. And that didn't happen. I then went on to Bible college, and I did Bible college for a year. I left there and I joined a Christian drama ministry, and we performed all over Australia.
Can you just explain the youth school, Bible college and drama?
Okay, so I did a youth leadership school for 6 months, and basically that was learning how to pastor young people. And I then went on to Bible college because I thought I might want to be a minister in the Salvation Army, but I didn't. And then I've always been very dramatic. There was a ministry called Covenant Players, and they perform in schools, not Christian. They don't have to be, they're a Christian ministry, but they don't have to be, like, we performed at non-Christian schools. We actually did a couple of performances in prisons. It's been running for many, many years. It's not running in Australia anymore, but it still runs in America. So I did that and I loved it. I loved, the drama. I loved performing, and I loved, meeting people and stuff. I met my children's father there. We got married. We had a baby, and 22 years ago in November, had a baby. When I was basically a mum for a lot of those years.
Was it your daughter or your son first?
My daughter was first. So I had her first, but my children are only 17 months apart. So pretty much had her, got pregnant again, and had my son. And then our marriage broke down, the kids' dads, and I was a single parent for 15 years. Well, yeah, 15 years now, but I was a single mum in Toowoomba, west of Brisbane, and there was a lot of things that happened, and they didn't get to see their dad a lot, and I was at school with my son a lot. He had trouble with staying in class, staying focused. He worked out, he's an incredibly intelligent dude. He worked out very early on that if he threw a chair, he'd be sent home. And so that was his ultimate goal. So he actually achieved that most of the time. And I would make him do chores at home. Like, he didn't get to just come home and play on the PlayStation or, the Wii or whatever it was then. I'd make him clean the toilet, and he'd be like, I'd rather be with you, Mum, cleaning the toilet than be at school. And actually, we've had conversations in the last, few months about, now that he's an adult, about why he behaved like that at school, why he found school so traumatizing. And I think I hope I don't misquote him. He'll tell me if I've misquoted him. But I believe, from my understanding from what he is saying, is that, one, he was bored. Two, when he didn't understand something, he felt like he needed to get out. So that was his way out, was to be sent home, because he didn't understand, say, mathematics, or but he was really smart, and he still is smart, and he struggled with most years in school. Like, he struggled with most grades. So I didn't actually start nursing till 7 years ago. So I had been a mum, and my daughter, she actually was very good at socialising, and she actually makes friends really, really easily. She's an incredible she's an incredible force. Like, she has this charm about her that draws people to her. And so she actually did socially, I guess, quite well at school, but at home we struggled. Her and I have always struggled with our relationship. So when about 6 years ago, I think it is, they were both in high school, and they could stay home on their own because they're old enough. I decided that I would study something, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't think I was smart enough to be a nurse, and even though I didn't do my RN, which is a registered nurse, I did the enrolled nurse at college, and that gives you a diploma in nursing, and you actually still have to register with the medical body of Australia, so you're still accountable, and you can do most of the things that, like, a registered nurse can do. so I did that, but I started studying part-time nursing, and then just happened that my son went down to Melbourne to live with his father, and my daughter went and lived with someone else. And that was when I had my breakdown as well. And so my son couldn't come back to me, and his dad decided to put him in foster care. And my daughter was living with someone, and she seemed happy there. So I didn't actually want to break that up and bring her back and live with me when I was still not well mentally. So I just somehow ended up not having any children at home for the first time in like 15 years. And I liked the freedom. I missed them, but it was also nice to finally just have some time for myself to get better and stuff. But I was studying. I started studying nursing, and then I went full-time. And I finished 4.5 years ago, enrolled nursing, and I thought, I might go on and do my registered nursing at university level. And I then went, I wanted this job at this mental health hospital. That was the job I wanted. I'd done a placement there and I wanted it. And so I applied for a job there, and I didn't hear back from them for a year. And I didn't have any work for the first year out of nursing. It's crazy to say in the middle of a pandemic that there was no nursing jobs, but there were no real nursing jobs for enrolled nurses that didn't have experience. And then I got this job at the mental hospital, and like I said, it was my dream job. And nursing, I loved nursing. But part of me also would be like, I just don't get enough time to sit and chat with the patients, because you're either watching someone or you're doing rounds, or, also when you're in that environment, if you can get a minute to do nothing, you do nothing. You don't go out and look for more work. So there was always that part of me that was like, I'd like to, maybe do something else as well as this job. And it was a really well-paid job. So the enrolled nurses there are the best paid in Queensland because of the jobs they do. And the registered nurses, I don't know about them, but yeah. So I wanted to do more than just, I guess, look after someone in a nursing capacity. I wanted to maybe do more. I thought maybe I'd like to work in the community mental health nursing, but to do that you had to go on and do another 2 years of university, and I didn't want to do that. And I never ever wanted to be a general nurse in wards in a general hospital. It never appealed to me. And then, so that's where I kind of ended up looking, once I lost my job, how I could use, the 2 years that I was at this mental health hospital, mental health, what could I do? And so my ultimate goal probably is I would like to work with the families of people that have someone in a mental health hospital or have mental health issues, because I've been, in my lived experience, I've been a mental health nurse, but I've also had mental health problems, and I've also been someone that's lived with people with mental health. And so, there's lots of support for the person going through mental health, but there was one incident that happened when I was working at another place to do with mental health, and this family came in, and they had a child. He was an adult, but he came in and they were all crying, and he wasn't, but the family, there was mum, dad, brothers, sisters, they were all crying. And I remember this kind of tug at my heart, sort of saying, who's looking after them? yes, I want to look after the patient, but what about, and I remember saying to them, it'll be okay. And I remember thinking, I wish I had time to actually go sit with them and have a coffee and actually, just be like that liaison between, my child's in hospital for a mental health issue. How do I deal with this? To sitting down and just going, you know what, he's in the best place. And that's probably where I'd like to go eventually. I don't know how to get there just yet. One of the lecturers where I'm doing my study, he has, suggested doing social work at university, but that requires a lot more study. One of the triggers, I don't want to work with children that have additional needs because I've done that, and I don't want to be reminded of some of the times that weren't great, not because of my children, but because of just the situation. So that's where I'm at now, and I want to work within the mental health field, so that I have a bit more of an input into recovery instead of just loading them up with drugs.
Thank you so much for giving us all those insights about you, and it's a lot of personal stories. So we really appreciate your openness and telling all of this to our listeners and to us. And we try to find an end here now. But Kellie is a member of our Unpopular People community. You can find her on Discord. Please, if you have any more questions, because there are so many more open questions, but we try to have this format so people can get an idea about you, and if there's anyone tries to reach out to you, what's the easiest way to find you?
I guess through Discord. It's really the best way. If you can find me on Facebook, you can find me, but if not, I generally have it on private settings just because of the work I was doing before. They like that sort of professionalism, but definitely through, Unpopular People. I'm happy to talk, as you can tell. I love a good chat, especially when it's about me. Sorry. I hope that people from other countries don't think Australians are all like me.
Yeah, and there's also a question we always ask our guests close to the end, and this is, imagine you would have a school full of people, so it doesn't matter which age. What would you like to teach them?
I think I would like to tell them that the most important person to love is yourself. I know that sounds really cliche, but I think don't be obsessed with how you look. Be obsessed with how kind and loving you are to other people, and be obsessed about, getting change in your life, and maybe have some free will and change how you want to be. If you're not happy with who you are, I don't mean physically, work on the inside always radiates to the outside. And I believe in kindness, and I think if you're kind to someone, you might be the only person that's ever been kind to them. So that was what I would say. Just love yourself. Without loving yourself, you can't love anyone else.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for those very beautiful words from a beautiful person, and thank you also, for all the things you've done so far. We studied together, just for our guests, so they know where we know each other from, and I want to say hi to your kids through the microphone now. Maybe we have the chance to meet them in person one day, and I think you've done a great job with them too. So they should be proud of themselves, and they should be proud of their mother. And we say goodbye from our side.
Yeah, if there are any final words for our listeners you want to say, now's the time for it.
Thank you to Ben and Eliza. I have trouble with names. Thank you for asking me, and thank you for the delicious lunch. was like next level. So thank you very much. I feel really honoured, and I love studying with Ben. He, makes the class fun too. So, we were just talking. We love our class, and our class is pretty awesome, and it's exciting, the next adventure. But yeah, I just want to say, take care of yourselves and in your loved ones, and sometimes stepping back is the best option for everyone, and it may hurt and be painful, but it might be the best thing and might help that person get to the next level. So thank you very much for listening to my ramble.
Yeah, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode with Kellie.
We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you want to find out more about unpopular people, please visit our website www.unpopularpeople.com. You can also find the show notes about Kellie there.
And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter with all important information about our Unpopular People project and the opportunity to become a member of our Unpopular People community.